Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning and welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and I'm thrilled to have you join us here today. This podcast is ranked in the top 2% of the most popular podcasts in the world. And honestly, it's because of my guests. They are fantastic. And our topic today asks the question, what is the most difficult challenge all entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business leaders face? And my guest, Philippe Bouissou, is here with the answer, and he's written a book about it too. Now, Philippe Bouissou, Ph.D., is a name that resonates through the heart of Silicon Valley. For over 3 decades, he has danced on the cutting edge, donning the hats of an entrepreneur, a CEO, a venture capitalist, and other things too. And he has served on the boards of no fewer than 23 companies. I don't know if he sleeps. I think I've asked him that before. He is a growth expert and best-selling author of Aligning the Dots. And that book is an important part of my entrepreneurial library, as Philippe has been my guest before. And he was just recently featured in the top 100 innovators, and I think in Entrepreneur Magazine. I'll get him to just straighten that out for me. So good morning, Philippe, and welcome back to Your Partner in Success Radio. And before we get started, can you just kind of share with our audience a little bit about you and how you like to show up in the world?
Yes, good morning, Denise. It's a real pleasure to be on your show again. Really appreciate it. My background's a bit eclectic. I actually studied as a physicist. I have a PhD in nonlinear physics in chaos theory, which I use every day with the companies that we're helping here. And then I decided to get into business. I really enjoy meeting people, and I'm a people's guy. And doing physics, you are very narrow in a very deep field that not too many people around the world really understand. So I wanted to apply physics to business and try to look at business a little bit differently, and I've done that, in an interesting way. And then, I studied a company. I sold it too quickly, which was a mistake, but I was young and I learned. Then I worked at Hachette, one of the largest publishing companies in the world, to help them with electronic publishing. Then I went to Apple, and then I became a venture capitalist and really was on the other side of the table, understanding what it means to invest and help company and through liquidity events. And then I've been doing management consulting for maybe 15 years now, and studied Blue Dots about 10 years ago, actually.
This before, during our last conversation, do you sleep? And
Yeah,
I think you pretended like you do, but I'm not sure I believed
no,
it then or now.
I do sleep. I need to sleep. I think physiologically it's really important to sleep. I try to sleep 6 to 7 hours a day. And Napoleon had this amazing capability of sleeping just a few hours in the battlefield, and he would rest and he'd be fresh. It's like I'm not Napoleon. I don't know how he did it, and I can't do that. So yeah, I do sleep. But I also am very efficient with my time and where I decide to invest my time and energy, because I'm going to run out of time and energy like everybody else. So I am very conscious about that and try to be as efficient and as effective as I can.
I've always had a problem with sleeping. It's not one of my higher skills.
Yeah.
It just isn't, never has been. I was that way as a very young child. So if
Mhm.
I sleep somewhere between 3 and maybe 4 hours, not ever in a row, I don't manage it in a row.
Wow.
But if I can sleep, 3 to 4 to 5 hours in a night in chunks, I'm okay. But I
Wow.
have found that if I sleep for a solid 8 hours, I probably should go to the doctor. I'm sick.
Yeah, that would be too much. Yeah, you
There's
can't
something
go from one
wrong with
extreme
me.
you go from one extreme
Right.
to the other, right?
That's exactly right. And I wanted to go ahead and fix what I said. You were recently featured in the top 100 innovators and an
An
Entrepreneurs
Entrepreneurs
Magazine.
Magazine. That's correct. Yes. Yes. And I have no
Okay.
idea how they selected me, to be honest. I just have no idea, but they contacted me, and I was honored to be
Nice.
on the magazine. In fact, I'll be on the cover page of the magazine that's going to come out in 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
Oh, you've got to send me a copy of
I
that
will.
or send me a
Well,
picture of it, and I will make sure that our audience can see it, they can find it. So I'll be, saying, "Hey, where's my picture? Send me a picture."
I will do that.
I wanted to ask you because we started out with what are the toughest challenges that entrepreneurs face today? What do you consider to be the toughest challenges?
Yeah, I think that being an entrepreneur and starting and running and growing a business is extremely difficult. And I know because I've been there, I've done this. It's a very tedious job. It's not the glamorous thing that people think it is. It's really hard. It's very lonely because there's not a lot of people you can share, the challenges that you're facing as a CEO, as an entrepreneur. People often say, well, it's like being on a roller coaster. And I used to correct that and say, yes, but you don't even see the rails because you're in the dark. But I actually found a better way to say it now. I say, yeah, it's like being on a roller coaster, but with a lot more angst than amusement. And I think that captures it really well. And it is really difficult. So my empathy and my respect and admiration for any entrepreneur, regardless of what they do, whether they're selling ice cream in a corner street or, starting a shoe or a retail business or being an electrician or being, a CEO of a Silicon Valley company, I have a lot of respect for that. I think that among all the challenges that those CEOs and entrepreneurs face, to me, the most difficult one is to figure out how to grow and what to do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow the business. And the reason it's a very difficult challenge is because there is no simple answer to that very simple and deceptively simple question. And I always compare it to parenting. I think parenting is very difficult. And there are no books, or there are thousands of books, which is the same thing, that try to tell you what to do. You don't go and get a parenting diploma to be a good parent. That just doesn't exist. And what's even harder is that every child, if you have several children, is actually does not necessarily cannot necessarily be raised in the same way. I mean, of course, there's fundamental rules about respect and being polite and so on and so forth, but it's very different from one child to another. And I think companies are very similar to that. You all love them, you want them to be successful, but you have to help them grow, you have to parent them in a very different way. And that's why it's a very difficult challenge, but it's also exciting because there is no simple answer. And that's what I really like about that challenge.
Makes sense to me. I mean, I grew up in a large, very loud family. They're loud. I'm an introvert. They about half killed me. I couldn't stand it. I was hiding all the time.
I'm right.
But I realized later as I got older that my parents had a real chore because we were
Oh
all
yeah.
very different people.
Yeah.
They were loud, they were boisterous, they were climbing in and out of windows and up and down things, and I was reading a book. And it didn't matter. We all, like you said, we needed to be taught the respect and where we were supposed to live in the family while being our own selves. And I don't know
Right.
how they managed it. I'm
Yeah.
surprised any of us lived past 13, to be honest with you. It's
Yeah,
just we
yeah, it's
shouldn't
really
have.
hard. And I think you don't really realize how hard it is until you become a parent, the same way you don't realize how hard it is to build a business until you do it and try to do it. So there's a lot of really good similarities between the two challenges, I think.
A lot of parallels there.
Yeah.
You pioneered a revolutionary methodology called A4, precision
Mhm.
alignment, and you've trademarked that. And it's lighting the fires of faster, sustainable revenue growth across the business world. And I'm using that word and today because it's kind of important. It's brilliantly illuminated in your landmark TED Talk, The Secret to Grow Any Business. That TED Talk, at last time I looked, has received over 1 million views.
Mhm.
Good for you.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you. Yeah, I think that
What that is. I mean, it sounds scary. A4 precision alignment. We're like, oh, geez, what does
yeah.
that
Well,
mean?
yeah, I think the key word in that is alignment. So what I realized is that businesses don't grow as fast as they can because somewhere they are misaligned with that target market. And the word target is important. But so what happens is I realized that businesses are like mechanical watches. If you misalign those fine gears, then the watch may still be working, but it will eventually slow down and eventually stop ticking. And so I think the big insight I had a few years ago was that I realized that the maximum growth rate of any business can only be achieved when that business and the target market are perfectly aligned. And so it's fundamentally a problem of alignment.
Right,
And
but how do you know when they're aligned? I mean, there's
so,
got to be a method for that.
right, so that's a great question. So the next step was, well, what does it mean? Which is the question you're asking. What does it mean to be aligned with my target market? And the other big discovery I made, which really profoundly affected me and changed the way I look at any business, was that I realized that there are four universal axes of alignment. And the stunning fact is that those axes of alignment are truly universal. So I can take any business, doesn't matter what they are, what they do, what kind of business model, whether it's a product or a service company, how big they are. Those four axes of alignment are universal. So I can take a cafe on the left bank in Paris. I can take a startup here in Silicon Valley where I am. I can take a small company in Miami or in Louisiana where you are, Denise, or I can take a Fortune 500 company. Those four principles of alignment exist and they are exactly the same. And let me describe very quickly what they are. The first axis of alignment is that the pain of the prospect or the customer and the claim that the business makes to address that pain must be aligned, right? So if you come to me, Denise, and say, I have a headache and I show you a stomachache pill, well, clearly you're not going to buy my pill because your pain and my claim are not aligned. The second axis is the perception must be aligned with the message. And the message is how I describe and explain my claim to you. And the perception is how you understand it. So let's assume I have the right pill for your headache. It will cure your headache in 10 minutes. It costs 99 cents. But I describe it to you in Korean. I'm assuming you don't speak Korean. I used to say it in French, but it's like, oh, I speak French. Obviously, that's not going to work. So if I describe it to you in Korean, you're like, what the heck is this guy talking about? There's no way you're going to buy the pill, even though it's the perfect pill for your headache. Right? So that's the alignment. What I describe and what you understand in terms of the claim have to be aligned. The third one is the way customers want to buy and acquire the product or the service, and the way that product or service is sold in a marketplace have to be aligned. So if I say, Denise, you can get my pill, but you have to fly here to the Bay Area, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm in town in Louisiana. Why can't I just go to the next pharmacy and buy the pill there? And so it has to be frictionless. The way people acquire the product once they've decided to buy has to be frictionless, and it has to be very easy, and it has to be aligned with the way they want to acquire that product. And then the fourth axis of alignment is my favorite because I actually stole it out of the Apple playbook. So I worked at Apple and I worked directly for Steve Jobs. And I always say, yes, this is the way I lost my hair, in case you ever wondered. But there are some really interesting lessons I learned from Steve. And one of them was that I realized that there is one and only one business on this planet. So I realized that every single company, every single business is doing the same thing. And we are all in the exact same business. So whether I take American Airlines or Tesla or McDonald's, the same business. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight. So we are in the business of manufacturing and delivering delight to our customers. And so the last axis of alignment is that the expected delight that I have after I purchase the product and what is actually delivered to me, the experience of the product or the service, those two things must be aligned. So back to the analogy of the pill, if you now take my pill and you expect to be headache-free in 20 minutes, and then you take it and you start to have a rash and you have a fever and you feel even worse, well, obviously that's not what you expect. So that misalignment, that impedance mismatch will be in the way of me growing my business. So the four universal axes of alignment are the pain of the customer and the claim that the business makes to address that pain have to be aligned. that the message, which is how the claim is expressed, and the perception, which is how it's understood, must be aligned, that the way customers want to buy and the way the company is selling in the marketplace must be aligned. And then finally, the expected delight and what is actually delivered to that customer must be aligned. And if you perfectly align your business along those four axes with your target market, then the business will grow as fast as possible within that target market. And that's really the fundamental notion of how you solve the puzzle of growth.
Right. And when you explain it like that, it's so very clear. And I was scribbling it down, I was writing it down, I was sending an arrow over to here because I had the way I wrote it down, I had message at the end of the sentence and perception at the first of the sentence, but it actually
Mhm.
needed to be reversed.
Mhm.
Once you explained all of that, I went, okay, now I understand it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a very simple concept, but there's two comments. One is I learned at Apple that simplicity is really, really hard because that's what Apple is all about. And
Right.
then the second thing is that I kind of kick myself for why did it take me like 25 years to figure this out? Because you look at it, it's very common sense. I've never met somebody who is challenging those four axes of alignment because you can't. But at the same time, it's like, why hasn't anybody else thought about this? Because it's very simple, it's very common sense. But I think it's the structure and the framework, those lenses, through which you look at the challenge of growth that gives you a very different perspective. And that's, what I'm excited about. And that's what I wrote the book and did the TED Talk because I want people to know, I want CEOs and entrepreneurs to know, hey, there is a new way to think about that problem that will actually help you tremendously as opposed to the traditional way of thinking, well, I'm gonna, my sales guys can't sell, they're bad. We need to change the sales guys, or we need to discount more our product, or we need to redo our logo, whatever. Those things never work. And because it's not in the framework of alignment.
And I think I wrote it down correctly that this planet manufactures and delivers basically one thing, and that's delight, I think you
That's
said.
right.
And I wrote that down because I'm going to have to sit with that for a while. But here's, and I loved it. I went, whoa. And I think you and I have talked about this before, not in that particular phraseology though. So I really want to go kind of deep into that. But
Mhm.
what I do know is that we are all in sales, all of us. A 3-year-old is going to get whatever that 3-year-old
Right.
wants. Politicians, right now we were talking about this with a friend of mine yesterday, and I'm not talking politics on this show, but it's all, in my opinion, I could be dead wrong.
Mhm.
It's about the messaging and how persuasive they are. If they
Yeah.
can't persuade me, I'm not voting for a darn thing.
Right. So I want to be a little bit controversial here, if I may. And I'm talking about businesses. I'm not talking about political ideas or things like this or religion or anything like this. I'm talking about specifically about businesses. I always tell CEO, how many salespeople do you have? And let's say they say you have 26, reps and, and account executives and all that, and I will have all those sales team. I say, you're making a mistake. You should have zero salespeople, zero. And of course, the CEO is shocked and surprised. Says, what do you mean? I said, nobody in your company should be selling. That's a bad idea. What they should do instead is helping, not selling.
Serving, helping.
And serving. The problem with selling is that it's very transactional. Let me tell you how great my product is, and you need to buy it, and this is the price, and you need to sign, the PO or the paper, or you give me your credit card. That's basically how companies sell. If you walk into an Apple store today, and you can do the test, nobody, the Apple guys, will never ask you, what do you want to buy? Never. In fact, they'll be fired if they ask that question. The question they ask is, hey, how are you doing? How can I help you? And it's profound because they are not on commission. So whether you buy or not a product in the store doesn't affect their paycheck. They will be paid the same way. And in fact, they are trained to sell you a downgraded product. In fact, actually, I was in Apple Store yesterday and they did the test. And so if you go there and you say, I want to buy an iPhone 16 that just came out, and you say, I'm thinking of the Pro, the sales guy, sorry, see, I made a mistake. The person over there might say, well, do you take a lot of pictures and photographies and do you care? Because if you don't, the 16 is fine. You don't need a pro. And they are really trying to help you figure out what is the best product within the context of what you're trying to do in your life and your budget. They are not trying to sell you anything. So, I sit on those calls, on the sales calls. We have a client right now. We've been sitting on those calls, and those are, what I call the crocodile sales guys. And what I mean by that is that they have a big mouth and a small ear. And I told the CEO, I said, you need to fire all those crocodiles and you need to hire elephants because elephants, they have a big ear and a small mouth. And that's what you need because those guys were just talking and talking and talking instead of like, how can I help you, Denise? What is your challenge? I want to help you shine. I want you to be promoted in the company. Is there anything I can do for that? That's a very different conversation than, hey, buy my product because it's the best in the world.
And I think we're starting to finally see that. And I've been around a lot of hard selling people, and even they are starting to back down a little bit and saying, this isn't working.
Right.
Maybe it's starting to feel icky to them. I don't know. It feels icky to me when I'm the recipient of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are saying, I'm really here. And I hate the term servant leader. I think it's overused. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing life properly, that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that should extend to me. I'm a web developer. Do I want to build your website? Probably. Maybe not.
Right.
Depends on what it is that you need. I
Yeah.
have been known to say, listen, I'm not your person. What
Yeah.
you need is either outside of my skill level or it's just something I'm not willing to build. But
Right.
I can recommend somebody else to you.
Yeah, and that
But
takes a lot of courage to do that. And many people will
yeah.
want to close that transaction because it's money and it's a short-term thinking, and it's a disservice to their brand and their equity brand, and it's a disservice to the customer because that's not what they need. Um,
And
I say it all the time. I said you can hire us as Blue Dot. We are not better than McKinsey and Bain or BCG or any of those consulting companies. We're not better, but we're different. What we do is special. And I know they don't do it. They don't have the methodology. They don't have the tools that we've developed over 10 years. And they do certain things really, really well that we don't do. And so if that's what you need, then you should hire them. And they are amazing companies. They are. I mean, McKinsey is an amazing company. In fact, I advise any young people to spend a couple of years there. It's a tremendous learning platform. But so I'm not trying to say we're better than McKinsey because we're not, but we're different. The way we think about the problem of growth is very unique to us. And I know that McKinsey and Bain and BCG, they don't do it this way. They do it a different way. And sometimes that different way might be better for the customer. And that's okay. I don't have any problem with that.
that
So
is
it's a matter
the
of
right way
honesty
to
and
think about
integrity.
it, I think.
Yeah.
And what happens is when you've had the crocodile. Here, I would say it was an alligator because we've got them
Oh, that's
everywhere.
right. Sorry, I should have
They
paid
are
attention to
everywhere.
that. You're right.
No, Florida right now with the
Yes.
mess over there, those are crocodiles. But the thing is, once you have talked somebody into buying somebody, a service or a product, and they've got it and they hate it, now you've got a whole nother set of challenges
Yes. Oh, yeah.
because you did not give them what they really needed.
That's right. So that's the misalignment on the fourth axis, which is what they expected is not what was delivered. And that's bad, really bad. I mean, think of Theranos with Elizabeth Holmes, trying to do all those tests on one, drop of blood. Everybody wants that. I mean, I don't know anybody would rather have that than a needle in your veins. But the problem is that it didn't work. And so, the expected delight wasn't there because the results were bad, and she's in jail right now. And so
I
that's
thought
a good
somebody had
example
to
of,
go to jail for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
because of misalignment and misguiding and the lies and all that stuff. Um, and it's a tragedy because there are startup and companies now that are trying to solve this problem, the same problem, but for a limited set of tests. And they are very successful. Technically, it works. But then there is so much negativity or negative thinking about Theranos that people are like, well, this will never work. No, it will work. So not only did she hurt the customers and the prospect, but also the entire perspective for the industry because now people are very skeptical. And indeed, it works really well for particular tests, not all of them, but some particular tests. So it's a good
Marketing.
example of a fundamental, really bad misalignment along the fourth axis.
Right. So they're going to have a marketing issue.
Yeah. Now, if you look at Cirque du Soleil, it's the opposite example, which is, they really truly delight people. And people pay, and, it's a billion-dollar business, and they are very successful because people are enchanted. They love the show and they're delighted, and there's really good alignment on that front.
Well, we're talking about startups, Philippe. So in your experience, or you were mentioning it rather, what are the key factors that contribute to sustainable growth for startups outside of having somebody try to ruin your entire industry by lying about everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's those four axes that I described. So if you have a startup or even just an idea and you said, yeah, I think I want to build a business around this idea, I would really encourage you to start thinking very hard about those four axes. What pain are you after? Who has that pain? How big is this market? What is my unique claim? Who else is making a claim against that pain, and why is my claim different? Um, and before you build anything or you do anything, just sit down and look at the four axes and ask yourself, am I aligned along those four axes, or which of those four axes is most misaligned, and how do I rectify that? How do I, solve that misalignment? Then you can start to execute. But I would really encourage people to think really hard. And those are not easy questions. In fact, I used to, I've invested in 14 or 15 companies. I looked at 2,300 businesses. And I used to ask the CEO, like I would meet at a cocktail party, I would say, hey, what do you do? And then it would go on and on and on. And it's like, I had to stop them and said, look, I am not going to buy your product. I'm not a prospect. I'm not interested in this switch, gigabit Ethernet switch that you're describing to me. Um, so now I actually ask a different question, and I would encourage you and everybody who's listening to do this. Instead of asking what they do, I said, don't tell me what you do, but tell me in one sentence, why should I buy your product or your service? And what you'll find out is many CEOs fail that test, which is really disturbing to me. It's like they can't even explain to me why I should buy whatever they do. And so, because they are focusing on the what, they're not focusing on the why. And that is another way to think about the business. It's like, here is why you should buy my product, even though I haven't described it to you. And so if you reverse that and do the test, just ask people around and you'll see, even CEOs of very large companies sometimes can't even answer that question.
Do you have any that you can share when you've asked that question and you just got a blank look without telling us who the company is? You don't need to do that.
Yeah, sometimes it's a blank look, and sometimes they are like, you can see that they are very destabilized because they never really thought about that, which is mind blowing. It baffles me. It's like you can't tell me why I should buy your product. I mean, so they are very good at describing what they do, but they are not good at understanding why customers should really care, because they have a very self-centric view. They are not thinking
Right.
customer.
Right.
They are thinking completely upside down.
Well, and they're thinking like
Problem.
the boss, I guess. I've got this to do and I've got this team and there's probably a rabbit warren inside their heads. And they
Mhm.
probably, if they ever had sight of why somebody needs their product, if they even had that to begin with, it's probably long gone.
Yeah. And like CEOs don't ask why people don't buy. And this is, to me, that's my favorite call. That you call a lost prospect and you say, hey, Jack, I know you decided not to buy my product, which is perfectly fine. You're a smart guy. I know this is the right thing to do for you or your business. But I just have a simple question is tell me why did you decide to not buy our product? Why? And if you do that in an honest way, and you tell the person, said, hey, I'm not trying to convince you to buy our product. You made a decision and I respect it. And I know it's the right decision for you. Just help me understand why didn't you buy our product? What was wrong? And you learn a lot more, but very few CEOs do that. Every CEOs claim to know why, they lost a deal or they lost a prospect. But the truth of the matter is that there's very few that really scientifically do it because they are afraid of the answer, you know.
Have let a person go in your business or they're leaving voluntarily or you've said you got to go now. If
Yeah,
you don't do an exit interview with them,
that's
you are
right.
missing out on all kinds of
Right.
information. information.
So I unfortunately, I had to let a lot of people go in my business life, and I hated it like everybody else. But the way I did it was particular. I would say, "Hey, Jack, we're gonna let you go today, and I am going to take you for dinner or lunch, whatever, in 2 to 3 weeks. And if you want to know why we let you go, I will explain this to you." And I think that it happened twice where the person followed up. And the reason is they know why they are being fired. You don't have to explain, they know. And and I really appreciate, and I said that honestly. I said, I am serious. Well, I'll take you out to dinner, I'll take you out to lunch, and we'll discuss this. But I don't want to do this right now because you're shocked that we're gonna let you go. And you have to go through that process of emotion and grief in a way. But and they didn't never call me back because they know exactly why they were fired. They didn't want to meet because they knew. And so I think that you're right. This exit interview is really important because I'm doing this to try to help them so that they can be successful in their next job. And sometimes we lay people off for purely economic reasons. Now, it's not nothing to really do with them. We have, we have a burn rate that's too high and those kinds of things. Um, but I think there is a gracious and respectful way of doing it so that you can truly help the person as opposed to creating this bite test in their mouth, which there is no need to do, in my opinion. Now, of course, if the person stole money, that's a whole different thing. But again, you're not going
It
to have
would
no,
be,
but that's a different thing. But you know, people fundamentally know, but I've always, as a manager, I always been very clear what the objectives are. I would pay a lot of attention to my team and be behind them and try to help them be successful because I want them to be successful. That's what a good leader is all about.
and going back just a little bit to where you would call somebody and say, listen, I know you're not going to use our services. I would love to know why, because, and you can frame it, and I assume you do a frame it like this will be helpful to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Yeah, because
I'm so
I thought my product would be really good for you. I
perfect
thought it
for
was
you,
aligned
right?
with what you expected, and I realized it's not, and that's fine. But it's like I want to build a better product. Can you please help me? And they'll tell you,
Yeah,
if
I would think they would. And I was going to ask
yeah,
you, they don't hang up on you or
no, they
anything like,
don't.
oh,
No,
no, I'm not going to help you. But to me, that makes so much sense. Like, listen, thank you for spending the time with us. Thank you for, telling us no properly instead of just disappearing, as a lot of
yeah,
people do.
yeah,
And if you don't mind, could you help me figure out how I can better my product? So in case you ever want to refer somebody to me, you can do it with complete faith that they will get what they need from us.
yeah. And you learn a lot, and you take. I call that the market truth. You really understand what is going on, and you're not making it up. And then you can decide, oh, I'm trying to sell a tennis racket, and I realized this guy doesn't play tennis. Well, obviously, it was a misalignment with my ICP, with the ideal customer profile. And that's fine. It's like, but I wish I had asked the person very early in the process, do you play tennis? And if the answer is no, it's like, well, then, we sell tennis, tennis rackets, you're obviously not going to buy one. And so, it could be pricing, it could be I was mistreated by a sales guy. I mean, there's so many reasons, but you do want to know, where was the misalignment introduced in this entire journey and this entire interaction process? That's really important to know.
Again, what ICP means, I wrote it down, but I
It's
only
the
got halfway
ideal
through it.
customer, it's the ideal customer profile.
Ideal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Uh,
in fact, I think it should be called IPP, the ideal prospect profile, because the person that you're talking to is not a customer. He or she
Right.
hasn't bought yet, so it's a prospect. And I think it's an important distinction. But the ICP is a
I
very
goofed it
simple
up.
term.
I
Yeah.
wrote ideal and then I went, okay,
But
customer? You're
IPP
not a
is not,
customer yet.
yeah, yeah, because they're a prospect. So I think it should be called IPP, the ideal prospect profile, which is if in my simple example of selling tennis rackets, it's like that person has to be able to play tennis at least once a month or something like that. If they play tennis once every 10 years, they're not going to buy a racket. And so I'm not going to sell rackets in that city because it rains 355 days a year. They're not playing tennis, you know. So that's why I need to pursue segmentation, which is understanding what are the segments of the market of people who are truly qualified prospect who have a shot
Right.
at buying my product. I think I lost you. Are you on mute?
This happens to me quite a bit as a web developer, and I'm sure it's happened to you too, or still does, but people often have no idea who their audience is or who their they just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say to a prospective client, I say, well, who is your audience? Who are you
Right,
serving? And I never say, who are you selling to? I say, who are you serving?
right,
Oh, it's for everybody. Okay. And you can hear me screeching with my
right.
brakes, my foot on the
Right. So,
brake.
so
It's
what
like,
I say is, I say,
no.
look, my grandmother is 92 years old. She lives in France. Is that important to you? No. Okay. Well, then now I was starting to, segment and understand. Um, Trying to sell everything to everybody never ever works. Never.
It doesn't. And that leads me to another question. My mind's bouncing around a little bit, but if you are talking, and I'm sure that you do a lot of work with people who are business owners, they're the bosses, they're the CEO, the entrepreneur,
Mhm.
how can you help them really effectively navigate misalignments within their organizations? I know you said no salespeople, no crocodiles, but how else can you say, hey, this is where you may want to take a look at what is going on in your organization because you've got misalignments everywhere. Or maybe there's only one or two, but they're big.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's a really, really good question. So when I talk about the four universal axes of alignment, I'm talking about the alignment between the business and its target market. So it's kind of market-facing alignments, if you will. But it's actually four plus one. There is a fifth axis of alignment, which is really important, is the internal alignment, which is, the question you're asking. So it's very clear that if the organization is not internally aligned, then the execution of the four market-facing alignment is going to fail and the company is not going to grow. But I also think that you can only look at the internal alignment after you understand how well or unwell you're aligned with your target market, because then that will dictate what talent, what the processes, what tools do we need internally to execute those alignments. So for example, we never start with an internal alignment analysis because we don't know what the external alignment look like. And once we understand, those four external alignment, then we look internally and we said, okay, do we have the right team? Do we have the right talent? Do we have too many people? Do we have not enough people? Who do we hire? Who do we train? How do we retrain, the customer support or customer success team? I mean, those kinds of things. But you're right. If there is no internal alignment, then clearly the company is not going to grow because the execution of the four axes of alignment will not be successful.
You were saying at the very beginning, because, I remember saying after you spelled it all out, it's like, well, that makes sense. I
Mhm.
actually had one of those duh moments. It's like, well, of course that makes
I know it
sense.
happened to me after 25 years when I
I
found this
know.
out. It's like, why did it
Well,
take me?
yeah,
I mean, quantum
what the
mechanics is
heck?
really hard, I can tell you. One of my professor got the Nobel Prize 2 years ago. His name is Anna Aspect, and Anna has been spending all his life studying quantum physics, quantum mechanics. And one day he told me, he said, I still don't quite understand it. And I was shocked. I was said, Alan, how's that possible? You spent 40 years studying it, you got a Nobel Prize. And he said, it's because I can understand the math. I understand the equation. That I understand. But I cannot feel what quantum mechanics is. I don't feel it. And it's very disturbing to me. And so I think that, that was a really insightful comment to me. Like, understanding, feeling is part of understanding, actually.
See, now with that, is he digging deeper into maybe, like, there's an awful lot of talk about quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and spirituality.
Mm.
Maybe there was something lacking between those 2 points.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
Yeah, I think, where does physics stops and faith starts? I think it's a really interesting question, and I
Well,
certainly don't have an answer.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about Christianity at all. I
Yeah,
think faith is something entirely different.
yeah,
Listen,
that's,
I don't go to church. To me, and I'll probably offend somebody, but it's too much like organized crime for me.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not going to do it.
yeah, yeah,
Faith I
right.
have,
Yeah,
spirituality I
you
have,
have,
church,
right,
no.
right. Because it's a belief of something that you can't really prove. And as a physicist,
Right.
you always have a hard time with that. I mean, before we understood thunderstorms and lightning and all that stuff, people thought that it was an act of God, right? Now, when there is a thunderstorm or lightning, nobody tells you it's an act of God because we understand the physics. We understand exactly how it works. And I believe, and I may be wrong, as I don't know, but I believe that eventually we will be able to explain everything through physics and chemistry. Now, we're not there at all. We're so far away. But then once that happened, I think religion cannot exist anymore because it's like we know exactly what's happening. Now, I'm talking about we won't solve that problem in my
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
but I have faith in physics, if I can put it this way, that we'll be able to understand. And we understand so many things right now. But at the same time, the more we understand, the more we realize that there is so many other things that we don't understand. So it's kind of a never-ending quest, which is
Right.
intellectually really exciting because there's no end to it.
And I don't know about you, but I frequently experience what I call God winks. I'll
Mhm.
need an answer for something. It's been bothering me maybe for a month, maybe since I was 4 years old. There's no answer for it,
Right,
or
right.
there's no logical rationale behind it. And then all of a sudden, mostly when I'm in the shower for some reason, I get a God wink. I'm like, oh, there it is. So I think
Right.
that happened to you with the four. It's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I actually it was interesting because it wasn't like just a aha moment. It actually was building slowly. And then, in fact, it was by looking at a mechanical watch that I realized, like, businesses are just like mechanical watches, complicated, they're sensitive, they must be resilient. And I realized that it's all about alignment. The reason mechanical watches work so well is because they stay aligned for decades, and the pieces move billions of times inside, and it works really, really well. It's the same thing.
And it's not just the machining, it's not just the absolute excellence of the person who put it together. It's everything.
Yeah,
It's all meant to be in that one spot.
yeah,
And I know I didn't say that well, but I know what I meant. I hope somebody else did too. I
yeah, yeah.
wanted to ask you, you was there a particular challenging situation that you faced as an entrepreneur that you just said, ah, I've got no answer. What do I do?
Yeah, I
How do
think I
I
think
overcome this?
I think another big challenge is how do you hire the best talented people who know more than you do? And unfortunately, I tend to like and trust people from the beginning. And I got burned so many times. Like you hire the person and then you're disappointed. They're not executing. They're not the right person. They don't have the right culture. They don't fit the DNA of the business. And it's very hard to evaluate people and try to figure out whether they really are going to fit and they'll be happy as well because it's really good both ways. To me, that's a really tricky challenge, and I don't have a really good answer except to say hire them and be ready to accept the fact that they may not be the right person 6 months from now. And if that's the case, then you need to act. Don't drag that person along because you're doing a disservice to them and to you and to the business. That I think is a tough challenge. How do you recruit the right people? And I don't really have a good methodology or idea on how to do that.
As humans, we're also very different and we have so many
Yeah,
layers
yeah,
and we
very true.
present differently. You may
Sure.
see something and I see it completely differently.
That's right.
We're looking right at the same thing. So
Yeah, that's exactly
I
right. Yeah.
think what you're asking is probably impossible. But like you said earlier, you can only raise your children as best as you can raise them.
Yeah, and then you'll make a lot of mistakes looking back, and that's okay.
That's
You have to
exactly
accept the
right.
fact that you try the best. It's not about being
Right.
perfect because nobody is, but and if you do that, you kind of look back and say, it wasn't too bad after all. They are good human beings.
Across people where I just couldn't stand them. Couldn't stand them. And I rarely get to that point, but I almost never walk away from it because if I couldn't stand you from the beginning, there's probably a very
Right. Something
valid
more.
reason. And I'm
Right.
not going to try to talk my way out of it because
Uh,
that's almost always a mistake in my view.
yeah, I think you're making a good point. I think women in particular have very good intuitions. I tend to be a scientist, and it's like I need to really understand and look at data and measure stuff. And my wife's like, well, this guy is obviously not the right guy. And I'm like, how do you know? You haven't even met him. And so, yeah, but the way you talk about it, I know it's not going to work out. And sure enough, she's right. And I don't know how she does it. She has this intuition. And she actually taught me how to listen to my intuition much more and not try to rationalize. Like, I'm not going to invest in this company. I cannot explain to you why. There's no rational reason, but I just don't feel it. And I just don't feel the CEO. And that's okay. And I think, for me, listening to my intuition more is something that has helped me. And my wife has been great at helping me do that.
And that goes back to your friend. He doesn't feel it. He understands part of
Right.
it, but
Right.
he doesn't understand the part that he doesn't understand because he can't feel it. And see
Yeah.
that, I get that. I mean, that makes absolute sense to me.
Yeah.
But I bet you, and I'm just guessing, I bet he's more intensely curious about
Yeah.
almost everything now.
Yeah. And I think you found peace, eventually you accept the fact that you won't really fundamentally feel it and understand at that feeling level. And you just accept it. He said, I don't understand why, the Big Bang happened a particular way. It's like, but I accept the fact that I don't understand. I'm not trying to pretend that there is something else or there's a God or whatever. It's like, I'm okay with the fact that I don't understand. I can live with that.
There's a lot of things I will never understand. I'm always going to be curious,
Right.
but it's going to depend on the intensity of my curiosity, how deep I'm going to go in it.
Right. How much are you willing to invest of your
That's
energy?
exactly right. Exactly right. So we talked a little bit about what the role the customer feedback plays in navigating some difficulties. And I wanted to ask you very quickly, because I know you've got another call right after this, adaptability. How important do you find adaptability from everybody? You, your CEO, your housekeeper. I mean, we all have to have a certain amount of adaptability
Yeah.
and for us to mesh together, don't we?
Yeah, I think it's critical. And the reason is that you may align your business perfectly with your market, with your target market. But what happens is that market is very dynamic. So that market will change because of new technology, new pricing, new competition, whatever. And if you don't realize that the market is changed and you don't adapt to that new market, then you're gonna stay aligned with the where the market was, but not where it is now. And so you create a misalignment. And understanding and being able to change and adapt is really important. And in fact, the companies that are, very successful are the ones that have this unique ability to adapt and recognize opportunities and also recognize their mistakes and move on. And so I think it's really, really important. And then you go to the organization and the human beings running the company and building the business, the same thing, they have to adapt. The sacred cows and all those, old way of doing it. It's like, well, we've been doing this for 50 years. Why, and it's worked so well. Why do we need to change? Well, you need to change because the market is different. And it's not about you. It's about now really
Right,
recreating
right.
that new alignment. And we see that all the time with our clients because changing is the hardest thing to do. They're like, well, I want to lose weight, but I don't think I want to step on the treadmill. And it's like, well, you're not going to lose weight. You do have to exercise. And if you're not willing to exercise, then you embrace the status quo. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but don't expect to grow. And then somebody else is going to eat your lunch. And that may be okay. So
Yeah.
adaptability is crucial.
Well, we saw that in COVID.
Mhm.
People this is a term, I call it a COVID term pivot. I hate it.
Yeah,
I
I think
learned
I
to
think
hate that word,
no, but
but
I think it's very true. COVID definitely has
it
made
showed us a
people,
lot.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it forced a lot of changes and it forced a lot of, realignment necessity that wouldn't have happened without COVID. So in a way, I look at this as a blessing, even though, COVID was a curse. But I think, to those who understand that something can happen very quickly and completely impact your business, and if you are not back on your two feet saying, okay, what do we change to adapt? Then those will not survive and won't be successful and suddenly won't grow.
Philippe, thank you so much for joining us here again today. I really enjoyed talking with you. And can you tell our audience where to find your book, Aligning the Dots? It's an
Yeah, so the
important
book,
book. I'm looking right at it.
Yeah, the book, I actually have a copy. The book actually is on Amazon. It's probably the best way to find it. If anybody wants to connect with me, I'm always happy to connect. The best way is to do it on LinkedIn and just do a search on my name, Philippe Bouissou. And then they can also go to aligninthedots.com. They can go to philippebouissou.com, and of course, bluedotspartners.com, which is the firm that I'm running that's dedicated on helping any business grow faster. And so it should be pretty easy to connect with, hopefully.
And I'm just realizing, and I think I did this the last time we spoke, I pronounce your last name the way I would pronounce it in Cajun country, Boisseau.
Right.
So, but it's not. Say it again for me.
It's Bouissou, like a buoy and
Bouissou.
then soup, yes.
Right.
But it doesn't really matter, that doesn't affect me.
That's the only way I know how to do it. Like here, Robin is Robin, Martin is Martin. It's Cajun country.
I tell you, still, when I go to Starbucks or a cafe, they ask for your name when you take the order. And I said Bond, B-O-N-D, and they start to write it down. And then I said James Bond, and then they are laughing. And then I tell them I have a license to drink. But because otherwise I said Philippe, and they're like, well, how many P's, how many L's, how many E's? Like, just Bond. And then they have a smile, and and it makes everybody. And I'm pretty sure there's no other James Bond trying to order a coffee at the same time. So I'm pretty safe.
Probably not.
Right.
That would be funny though if somebody came behind you and said,
know.
"I'm also,
Right.
That's my coffee. Give me that coffee."
I'm 007. That's my
That's
coffee.
right.
But try it. It's fun. It's fun to do, and it makes people smile.
Yeah, and that's always important. Well, listen, everybody. In this episode of Your Partner in Success Radio, Philippe Bouissou. I'm going to go with the way.
That's all right.
Bouissou. Ph.D. He shared his insights on navigating the toughest challenges that every entrepreneur faces. All of us do. And you said something very important, Philippe. What do you do the first thing Monday morning to get moving, to make money, Monday morning? You have to have a plan when you wake up. And with decades of experience in Silicon Valley, he offered practical strategies for overcoming obstacles and discussed his very important A4 and then A4+1 is what I'm going to call it, precision alignment methodology designed to help businesses grow sustainably. And get his book. You'll discover how to adapt to challenges and align your operations with customer needs. So if you enjoyed this episode, and this visit with Philippe as much as I did, connect with him through his website or LinkedIn, and please go get that book. It really is an important addition to what I call your entrepreneurial library. And if you would, take a moment, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, because your feedback, it's important. It helps me bring you more inspiring content. Thank you, and I will see you next week, Philippe. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Denise, thank you so much for
pleasure.
that. Thank you. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be on your show. I love your podcast, and thank you so much for having me as a guest today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And I can't wait to see a picture of that magazine cover.
I will send it to you.
Okay. Talk to you again.
Thank you so much. Bye, Denise.
Bye.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.